Interviewer was obsessed with gap in working history, from March 2020 to October 2020. WTF. I mean WTF. I was literally asked 3 different times by this HR representative for an explanation. Apparently getting laid off from COVID pandemic wasn't a good excuse. The interview went pretty good. But at the end, for the 3rd time she asked me about this gap. And at this point I literally wanted to raise my voice and say, what do you remember of the summer of 2020? Like, were you recently woken from a coma? Almost everyone I knew was laid off or let go from their job. The whole world shut down. How can you not remember? And hell, even if it was March 2019 to October 2019, that's a pretty decent job turnover time emo. Damn. I know this is sour grapes and all, but that HR representative is clearly unqualified for their job if this is how they work. I was involved in a global experiment on the effectiveness of preventing a potentially fatal item from being transported to new areas. The scientific consensus is that lives were saved. Billions of people were involved in this operation. Would you like their phones numbers? Quote, "Don't put months on your resume. I have a 16-month gap, but it looks like no gap since I just put years on my resume. Never been asked about any gap. You were an independent consultant for a few months then, remember? I had a job interview like that. Ultimately I decided to not take the job. But I was asked like 34 times why there was a gap from April 2020 to January 2021. And she became incredulous when I explained I was laid off for COVID. The final time I was asked to explain, I just looked at her and asked what she was doing in that time because our industry shut down for an entire year. Sucking dick for 20s under the bridge cause of COVID, are you happy now? God. I'm so embarrassed. It is low-key a push to see if you were just enjoying living off unemployment. HR is still mad about that or something. One of the long-term symptoms from COVID is damaged memory and recall abilities. Man shrugging, light skin tone. I signed a non-disclosure agreement and can't discuss. Next question please. I always tell people to lie and say you were running your own business during those gaps. Moving company, lawns, delivery, whatever. You got $1,200 from the government and you were living large. I had a 2-month gap once from March to May, which would have been explained anyway by finishing up my master's degree after taking my exam and graduation. I did have a temp job, but I just left it off my resume to keep it one page as it wasn't relevant to the job I was applying for. Although this interview was 20 years ago, and the interviewer pounced on that gap and grilled me about it. Glad I didn't get that job. Probably the sign of a dumbass manager of HR representative if they obsess over something like that, and especially so when COVID is involved. Might be an unpopular opinion, but I would refuse to work for a company that is so chutty to complain about a COVID resume gap to begin with. That screams of a bait and switch for tax purposes. I was laid off, along with a good portion of the country, thanks to a worldwide pandemic and the closing of most businesses in NYC. How dare you not spend every waking moment of your life engaging in corporate work for money? The denial of the ongoing pandemic is wild. Nah, I would stop being respectful at that point. That's just dumb pouting cat. While I can appreciate that you were able to remain employed through the beginning of the COVID pandemic, many people weren't so fortunate. Many parts of the economy came to a standstill and the general population was having issues making Ends meet. Many large companies made cuts to their workforce and froze hiring as a wait-and-see preventative measure. So while I'm really happy for you in your situation, you need to understand that it was not the norm. I have huge gaps in my resume. Well before COVID, like a 1.5 year gap. Several times. In the past I've explained them as freelancing. Make up whatever details you like. I used graphic art. Small business startup. I was partners in a small fictitious drone flying biz. End of life care for a fictional loved one. Details. None of your business. No one has ever questioned me for further details on any of the above. Your mileage may vary. Say you were forced out of work due to COVID. That's the gap.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.